morning. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study. Hold on. I've got this kind of screwed up. There we go. Much better. Got to get the earphones in just right. If they're not snug inside, they kind of poke. But hi. Long time no see, it feels like. And that's because I haven't made a video in a while, but it hasn't been because I haven't been studying the Bible. I certainly have. I've been kind of stuck in study land. I was on Exodus 8. And what happened was, let me do my preamble. I'm Kurt. I'm your host for Freeway Bible Study. I'm a non-believer. I don't believe in God or Jesus or the saints. Sounds like a song. But I do find the stories interesting, especially because they form such a cornerstone of my culture. So it's worthwhile to know them, to know the stories well, so that I can, I gotta go if I'm gonna make that green, otherwise I'll never get across. There we go, I made it. That the detector has a hard time picking up my bike. It's worthwhile to understand it because it's so important to my culture, and I can speak from an informed perspective. And also, of course, if it's true, I'd like to know if it's true. Even though if I found out if it was true, I probably still would reject the God of the Bible as I understand that deity to be. So anyway, I've been kind of stuck in study land, and that's because I added a new resource. As I may have said in my last video, in addition to studying the Bible in the King James edition and the New International Version, NIV, I've added the Jewish Pentateuch, which is just their word for the first five books of the Bible. But more importantly, I've added commentary of a famous Jewish Rabbi Rashi. It's not his formal name. He has another name, but that's what everybody calls him. So we can call this Rashi commentary. And it's really added a new layer to my whole Bible study because he interjects. And he was a medieval French scholar, so it's quite old commentary, but it's very interesting. Like he'll interject, for example, little bits and pieces, like where it says that in Exodus 8 that Aaron was able to strike the ground with his staff and turn the dust of the ground in Egypt into fleas. Whereas with the other miracles that, like turning the river in red, turning the river to blood, or drawing frogs from the river onto the land, Pharaoh's magicians were able to reproduce all of those magical wonders. But the first one that they couldn't reproduce was the creation of the dust into lice. And according to the Rashi commentary, you read that passage, and then immediately below that, there's Rashi's words. And he says that the reason was because the magicians were being assisted by demons. And the demons are apparently unable to manipulate creatures smaller than a barley kernel. So, wow, who knew that? And how did he know that? But it's full of stuff like that. For example, another one was that Pharaoh, when he came out, I think I mentioned this in the last video, when he came out to the river in the morning, it wasn't because he necessarily wanted to take a bath. It's because he'd been holding his bladder all night, pretending to be a god. I mean, again, how did he possibly know that? So anyway, I added in this Rashi commentary, really, it's like, wow, my eyebrows are up in the, up by my forehead, and I gotta dig into it. So that's kind of what happened. And also, just, life kind of happens. But I did study every day, except for the last 3 days over the weekend. That's because I had really felt like I had finished all my formal study. By Friday, I was done. So by Thursday night. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I basically was waiting to make this video. So let's get to it. Exodus 8. In this chapter, the Lord has helped Moses and Aaron to begin to show Pharaoh the wonders and the power of the Lord. Mainly in the previous chapter in Exodus 7, transforming the waters of the Nile into blood and bringing frogs upon... No, that's next. Yeah, that's next. That's here. That's the frogs are now. So, drawing water, in the previous chapter, he changed the waters into blood and killed all the fish. Now, in this chapter, it depends on where you break the chapter. Here's another difference I discovered between the Jewish and the Christian versions of the Bible. They break differently. Exodus 7 actually Exodus 8, begins about 5 verses sooner in the Pentateuch than it does in the Christian King James and New International Version editions, which is really curious. And I talked to a Jewish friend about that, and he was wondering too, why in the world would they do that? So it's the same content roughly, except for the difference in the translations. They read differently. But the actual place, the break is different, which, wow, that seems someone took some liberties there, I think. Or maybe it never had place breaks. Maybe the breaks are arbitrary after the fact, just simply due to the scholars. That's probably true, in which case it's not such a big deal. So anyway, in Exodus 8 for the Pentateuch, we jump right into the bringing the frogs out of the river. In the King James and NIV editions, we actually see God instructing Moses to warn Pharaoh that he will bring frogs if he doesn't obey. You want to come in? Come on in. If he doesn't actually obey Pharaoh's or Moses' command to let the people go. And in 8, in the Pentateuch, we're right into the frogs. The warning already occurred as the tail end of Exodus 7. Confused? Yeah, I was too. That's part of the reason why it took me so long to get through this chapter. I was uncovering that. I actually was, at first I thought that someone had taken liberty and added content. I thought the Christians had added content. Then a Jewish friend pointed out, no, they just break it differently, and we were both surprised. So let's just kind of run with the Jewish version. So the Jewish version where the warning comes. No, let's go with the Christian version. The warning comes to. They're warning Pharaoh what will happen with the frogs. Pharaoh ignores it, and now Aaron does the magic with his staff, and the frogs emerge from the river and come swarming onto the land, into Pharaoh's bed and into the kneading trough, and everything is quite a mess. And now Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron to him, and he asks what it'll take to make it go away. And Moses says, let the people go to the simply let us go to the wilderness, 3 days journey to worship. And Pharaoh says, well, why don't you? Okay, I'll let you do that, but why don't you do your worship here? Take some time off and do your worship here. And then Moses responds, I guess it's Aaron doing the talking probably, but we can't do that, because we were going to sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians, and they would surely stone us for that. And it depends on the language. If you read the King James edition, it's really hard to figure out what's going on there. The New International is clear, and so is the Pentateuch. So basically what that means is that they're going to be sacrificing animals that are on their altar, blood sacrifice, burnt offerings. And these are animals that are gods for the Egyptians. I don't know exactly which animals they were, but imagine if you went down to India and you're going to decide you're going to sacrifice a cow to your god. The Hindus wouldn't be too happy about that, and they might stone you. I don't know if they stone in India, but you get the idea. So that's Moses and Aaron's complaint to Pharaoh. We can't possibly do our sacrifice here because you guys will kill us. We need to go away. And so Pharaoh relents, and Moses says, well, tell me when you want the frogs gone. And Pharaoh says, tomorrow. Well, why didn't he just say today? Right now. He's got frogs in his bed. Why would he want to wait another night? But anyway, okay, another indication this is just literature? Maybe. So he then, the next day comes, and Moses entreats God to remove the frogs, and they are removed. And they actually don't just go away, they die off in heaps and droves, and they're piled up. The corpses of the frogs are everywhere. So now that's what happens. And then it says in the Bible that Pharaoh hardens his heart, but we know that it's actually God doing the hardening, because he said so earlier that he would harden Pharaoh's heart. So is that a little deceiving maybe, and a little not quite true? Shouldn't it really say that Pharaoh hardened his heart again? As he keeps on hardening it so that he can have an excuse to do, God can have an excuse to do his magic and wonders. And what's wrong with calling it magic? I had someone kind of seem to bristle a little bit at my suggestion that what Moses and Aaron were doing was magic. And magic, by the word magic, I simply mean the invocation of some supernatural force to perform some act. So that's all I mean, and that's certainly what this is, if whether we call it magic or not. So next, now Pharaoh's heart hardens; he's not going to let the people go. So now, and the frogs are rotting and stinking. Add that to the fish, which are rotting and stinking too, right? Although the rivers return to its normal part. Oh, and also the magicians were able to bring the frogs out too. They did the same thing. I forgot about that. That's important. So now Moses and God tells Moses and Aaron, now strike it again, because Pharaoh hardened his heart. Strike the land, Aaron, with your rod. I'm sure he's speaking through Moses to Aaron. I don't think God ever speaks to Aaron directly, at least not yet. And the dust will turn to lice, like I said before. And that's what happened. There are lice absolutely everywhere. And now Pharaoh's magicians are unable to perform this trick. We know the reason why, because Rashi told us it's because demons can't control any creature smaller than a barley corn. So now God again, they go to Pharaoh. He summons them to Pharaoh again. Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron to him again, and asks them to make this go away. And Moses says, okay, so to speak, I'm okay, but you keep on deceiving us. You keep your promise this time, and let us go. And this time he says that he will. And I thought there was a condition. Was there some sort of a condition on this, or was it again repeating the same thing? Let them go the 3 days. Maybe there was no condition. They just said, yeah, I'll let you go. Just get rid of these yeah. Gnats, and I remember what it was. It wasn't a precondition. There was the two parts to this plague. In the Jewish version, it simply says a plague of beasts, which could mean all kinds of things. We don't know what it is. But in the Christian version, it says it's lice and then flies, the plague of flies. And so first come the lice, then come the flies. And the flies are absolutely everywhere, buzzing and whizzing and doing all their stuff, getting into everything. Really gross. And again, so then they agree to let it go, and then they do, and Pharaoh hardens his heart again, and that's the end of chapter 8 of Exodus. And so one of the things that came to mind, and this wasn't necessarily, although it did come to mind, but then I read it. So where does that stand? If you got an idea, and then like 1 minute, and then half an hour later you read the same idea, and is it your idea still? I don't know. So my idea, as I was reading through the plagues, was this sounds a lot like a natural order of events. I mean, you've got frogs dying and flies showing up and the like. Doesn't that just sound like natural order of things? And then almost after I read that, the scholarship I was reading said exactly the same thing. But it added to what I had said. It said that the first 6 plagues of Exodus, first 6 plagues on Egypt, read like a natural, like a, what do you call it? A natural calamity, a natural disaster. So let's see, in this order. So first of all, imagine that there's a bloom of phytoplankton. I think what it is. Anyway, it's flagellates. That's what it is. That are single-celled organisms that are red-colored in the Nile River. They bloom, and that happens periodically in the Nile and in other bodies of fresh water. And it's red in color, which would cause the water to turn red, and that bloom would then use up all the oxygen in the water, and guess what? The fish would die, and all the other animals in their water, or at least the less tolerant ones would die, less air depleted tolerant ones. So the fish die in droves. So you have the first plague and the second plague. The plague of the river turning to blood by virtue of becoming red, and the plague of the dying fish. And now the third, or maybe the dying fish are just a consequence of the blood. Maybe that's not a plague in itself. But the next plague is definitely the frogs. Now imagine if all the waters had been depleted of oxygen. Now there's lots of frogs living in them, and the fish are dying. The frogs might leave the water and start hopping about on the land and looking for food, looking for water, basically trying to find sustenance. And guess what? They're going to die out there because they're exposed as they are, and the river is no longer habitable. So now you've got dead frogs. There's the next plague. The plague to follow then is the plague of gnats and flies. And the gnats and flies then arrive to feed on the carcasses of the fish and the frogs that have died previously. And the next plague after that is the disease, the pestilence upon the beasts, the farm animals. And that could occur because of the dead, rotting bodies all around. Anthrax could spread, which then could be spread through contact from the flies, moving from the dead animals, the dead frogs and fish, to the cattle. And there you go. You have, I think it counted 6 plagues there, that are explained in a natural succession by virtue of what we know about the natural world. No deity needed, right? Fascinating. Yeah, why not? So, there you go. Exodus 8. Thanks for watching me. Now I'll get started on Exodus 9. Hopefully it won't take me 2 or 3 weeks like this last chapter. The further I go, the more time it takes. But that's okay, because I'm really learning a lot, and I'm having a fun time. So off we go. See you next time for more Bible study. Take care. Bye-bye.